Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So session 4 this is, and now we're moving in a slightly different direction. And of course, when you consider racing, what is racing without the person sitting on top of the horse? You get the elite level, and you've also got the amateur level. And we're also going to look at other people who are working within racing, looking at a sports medicine perspective of the elite jockey's life, but also then at every other level and vocational training for people who want to work with horses. So Professor, if I can invite you up to the stage, Professor Patrick Shu-hang is director out of all these 4 titles that he holds, also director at the Hong Kong Center for Sports Medicine and Sports Sciences. Professor, you're going to talk to us about the modern elite good jockey and give us that sports medicine perspective. So over to you.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. Kamsahamnida, right? So first of all, I would like to thank the Hong Kong Jockey Club and the Asian Racing Conference to invite me to come over here to share with you about my little experience in taking care of the jockeys as well as the application of the sports medicine and science knowledge in this elite sports, I would say that, right? So I'm coming from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, which I'm an orthopedic surgeon, means taking care of the bone and joints, muscle, tendons, all these stuff, right? So, and my subspecialty is sports medicine since 25 years back, right? So that's why I work in this university hospital, as well as working in the Hong Kong Sports Institute as an honorary consultant, taking care of the Hong Kong team regarding those elite sports, right? And well, my hospital is very near to the Sha-tin race course in Hong Kong. So that's why I have the obligations and the honor to take care of the injured jockeys over the years. Well, personally, I'm not, riding horse, but I play a lot of soccer, but I suffer from a lot of different sports injuries, and that's my operated knee back in 27 years back, the anterior cruciate ligaments of the knee joint, right? But because of that, right, I have experienced a lot about the sufferings of the elite sportsmen, including those jockeys when they are like out of competitions, out of trainings and all this, right? So I really want to help them with my expertise. Personally, I'm also a horse owner, right? So there's also increase a little bit of my touch on horse racings, right? Well, in the coming 30 minutes, I'm going to bring you through a little bit about the followings. First of all, I will talk about the jockeys' injuries. The epidemiology means the incidents and what the patterns of injuries that we discovered in Hong Kong and also around the world from literatures. And then secondly, I will talk about the preventive measures and how to apply those sports medicine and science knowledge in horse racing to improve the performance, right? And thirdly, I will touch on a little bit about the other applications of sports medicines in this field. And finally, I would like to conclude and discuss with all of you, right? Sorry. Just take a bit of that. Yeah. So you can see that, it's playing here, not playing here, right? Yeah, hopefully the rest of the videos will be playing. It's playing here in the theory, right? So suppose that all these videos are playing, right? Because I have like dozens of videos in this PowerPoint. Hopefully that will play in the screen. It's playing in the TV here, right? But those are about the jockeys falling and got different kinds of injuries, right? Hopefully we can fix that because there's. Okay, anyway, yeah. So well, the horse racing is a very well attended sport, I would say, that in Hong Kong and all over the world. And nowadays it's high professionalism. It involves high energy and fast-paced sports. So I regard it as a kind of sports, a very high demanding sports. However, the current knowledge and scientific research pertaining to jockeys' injuries are still very lacking, I say. So as I mentioned, I'll first bring you through about the jockey injuries right now. This is a very old paper, 27 years back from United States, right? It's one of the first paper talking about the different kinds of injuries that suffers by the jockeys, right, in horse racing. So you can see that, right, quite a lot of them suffer from injuries from like around the head and neck regions, the knee regions, the ankle regions, the spine and the upper limbs, right? So 20 years later, This is the paper published in 2018 this year from Australia, right? And very similar patterns have been observed. That means that over the past 20 years, the pattern is more or less the same, right? The predominant injured area is still around the ankle joint, the shoulders, the back, and the wrist and hand, right? And of course, adding on is those concussion and head injuries, right? Well, the most common injury mechanisms definitely is fell from horse, right? So how common is it, right? You can see that, well, from all these figures, is those figures from the American California with like 5 years of studies, showing that like for each jockey, they probably will fail once in every 500 races. Okay, they will fall once in every 500 races, right? In average, 50% of this fall will result in significant injury which require medical attention. So it's quite significant, I would say that, right? And if you talk about the whole track, the most common injuries taking place is around the gate. Before they enter the gate, inside the gate, and just started. And the second common is near the finishing lines at the final home stretch, right?
Oh,
now this is kind of one of the injuries that sorry from one of my patients, a jockey. Hopefully Amy will not feel very painful because a lot of them are her students, right? So he's still an apprentice, right? So he suffered from different kinds of injuries from this fall. A hip dislocation, a fracture of the foot, a fracture of the spine. That was like 2 months back only, right? So for this kind of injuries, luckily he did not require surgical interventions, but he needs to be cyanoed for about 3 to 4 months. Okay. Another videos showing now this another injuries, right? Well, this is also an apprentice like about 1.5 years back, right? He suffered from this injury and it resulted in an ankle fracture dislocations, right? And that was fixed with all the screws and plates. And he would need to be cyanoed for like about 3 to 4 months, right? So another case.
1400米賽事，黃浩南策騎嘅加福轉入400米直路時，突然間起擒並且跌倒。
Okay. So you can see that very often is the horse, the problem starts from the horse rather than the jockey itself, right? So in this case, this apprentice suffered from a lumbar spine fracture from the first level of the lumbar spine to the 4th level. So 4-level lumbar spine fractures, right? And he was cyanoed for about 2.5 to 3 months, right? So another injuries, right? So he suffered from a forearm fractures, right? You can see that the bone's broken, right, over here. So then we fix it, right, with the plates and screws, right? Well, those are the injuries that very commonly found affecting the limbs and the spine. You can see that. But you can see that for these cases, this is like a chain of horse falling down because of one horse fall down and then the others fall down. And then that resulted in a series of injuries. And in one of these resulted in head injuries, which what we call concussions, right? There's no bleeding inside the head or this, but he was like a bit confused, dizzy and all this. And then he needs to be cyanoed for about 3 weeks, right? Well, this is concussions. So indeed, concussions to a lot of people, it seems to be like something not very serious, like a hit on the head, but there's no bleeding inside the head, and then probably you can go back to train like 5 or 4 days later, right? But essentially not, right? If we follow strictly about the sports medicine guidelines for the other sports like rugby and soccer, right, concussion can be very serious consequence if you do not treat him well or monitor him or her very well, right? So indeed, concussion is not uncommon. From these papers from UK, showing that about 40% of those jockeys in their career experience kind of concussions. Okay, it's not just a simple bomb on the head. After that, they feel dizzy, a bit, nausea, and sometimes they lost a little bit of memory temporarily for a short while and all this, right? And then 19% of these concussed jockeys didn't seek any medical advice, and then they go back to train and then to race the horse, right? And then over 50% of those concussed took less than 5 days and go back to train by themselves. And this is very dangerous. Nowadays, if you are diagnosed to have concussions in the sports medicine arena around the world, in rugby, football, and other sports, you need to be cyanoed for at least 7 days. and then you need to be reassessed whether you're fit or not. So this is a very good guideline nowadays for all around the world, different kinds of sport, what we call a SCAT, right? The sports concussion, assessment tools, right? Now it's the 5th versions already. I think that nowadays we should try to engage these assessments in our jockeys, right? Indeed, as I mentioned, it is not an uncommon injuries among the jockeys, right? Well, this is another papers analyzing the injuries for those professional jockeys, and I want to take this to talk about the time they need to be cyanided. That means that they cannot train, they cannot race for how long after different kinds of injury. Looking at this, right? So for concussions, they need to be rested somehow because of the delay on the treatment and recognitions. They need to be rested for like 43 days. And for some serious injuries like fracture and all this, they need to be cyanided for 2 or 3 months, etc. So it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, a lot of resources to get them back, right? Well, this is even a little bit more serious. These are also UK studies and also including some studies from the United States talking about mortality, death. So for example, in Americans, every year they are having like about 1 to 4 cases of fatality, means death after falling from horse. But looking at this, horse racing is not that dangerous because if you compare with the other sports, rugby, soccer, and all this, it's slightly harder than rugby and soccer, but much more safer than the other kinds of sports like air sports, water sports, etc., as shown in these studies from the England and Wales group, right? So you can see that horse racing is like about, for every 100 million cases, 100 millions of day practice, there's only about 34 cases of mortality. So I just want to take this as a summary of what I've gone through over the past 10 minutes, right? So in summary, first of all, the most commonest cause of injury is fall from horse. It is important. That means that if we can minimize the chance of falling from horse, then probably we can minimize the injury. But how can we minimize the chance of falling from horse? It's probably we need to take care about the horse or the track, right? So secondly is the commonest regions, including those like head regions, the upper limbs, and the spine and the ankle joints. And the injury patterns most commonly is the fracture followed by the head injuries with concussions. So, and moreover, I want to summarize a little bit from all those papers I've read and those from literatures. So jockeys falls at about 1 every 500 rides. Okay? And second is 50% of the falls resulted in injury that need medical attention. Majority of the falls happened during the race. And most common reason for causing a fall is because of the sudden death or catastrophic event of the horse during the race. And most common injuries are the fractures around the upper limbs, 50%, and then 20% around the ankle joint, and then 10% around your spine, as well as the head injuries. Every jockey in average sustained 2.5 fractures in their career. Okay? Someone got none, but someone got more, right? And about 40% of the jockeys experience concussions during their career. And finally, mortality rate means death during horse racing is not that high. It's roughly 1 in 300,000 days of exposures for a jockey. Right? So this is all the figures probably for all of you here. For the first 10 minutes, you would like to have a bit of summaries, and for some of the administrators and we'd like to take this as a reference for the future's plannings for the welfare of the jockeys, right? So I would like to go to the second part of my presentation, which is about the preventions and how sports medicine can help to have a better performance of the jockeys, right? So we do not want to take this happen again, right? As I mentioned, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 horses falling down, right? So there are lots of measures to minimize injuries sustained by the horse. Interestingly, if you go to literatures and different organizations, they have different measures to try to cater for the horse, but need to for the jockeys, right? So the risk factors, which is known or studied for the horses, including the tracks, a lot of the studies try to investigate on how to improve the track to minimize the injuries, the falling of the horse, and then the weather, and also the starting gates. I think this is quite reasonable. If, as I mentioned before, if the horse fall, then the jockey will fall, and then the jockey will get injured, right? So, and that's why I think that there are some possible risk factors for the jockeys themselves, which may cause them to fall, irrespective whether the horse will fall or not. For example, the strength, the flexibility of the jockey, the endurance and power, the balance, the reaction time, and also the protective gear, as well as the number of races within a certain period. So those are being investigated slightly in some or a few papers, research, if you go back to check in the literatures, right, academic field, right. So as I mentioned, a horse injured will fall, and the jockey will fall and get injured. So this is very important to go hand in hand to minimize the fall of the jockey as well as the horses, right. Now, as I mentioned, there are little things to talk about, little literature, little studies to talk about or investigate on how to prevent the falls of the jockey. Most of the investigations are performed to try to minimize the fall of the horse, right? But those are some of the papers that I can find out. For example, this is a Australian paper talking about that, well, they may like to implement a very compulsory rigid vest that around the trunk, so much so that they can minimize the injuries to the spine when the jockey fell. Of course, helmets is definitely a compulsory. And this and other papers in the Americans try to use the administrative rule to try to minimize the injuries to the jockeys. Essentially, they decide a so-called decision tree model for the implementation of safety strategies in the horse racing industry. What does that mean? It means that they have different rules to try to restrict their apprentice jockeys from riding less accomplished horses, so as to minimize the risk of falling. Well, to prevent jockey from falling, as a medical doctor, I think they must be good at all this. The muscle strength and endurance, flexibility, balance, reaction time, body composition, or even aerobic capacity. So in sports medicine, in football, basketball, rugby, we have all this test factory to test all these stamina that is essential for an elite athlete. Just like, for example, for this, like people are testing the muscle strength, the hamstrings, and all this balance, agility. Well, those are very widely used nowadays for different kinds of team sports, especially. But for essential fitness that I just mentioned, it's not just for prevention of fall. For a lot of trainers or the jockeys, they themselves think that, well, falling, I can handle that, I just take care, right? But if you talk to them that if I improve your fitness, all these essential elements, it's not just preventing you from falling, it's improving your performance. Then probably you can persuade them to add more time in training for this basic physique. So this is also important for improving the performance. I just take this as an example, right? Probably 100 years ago, right? Well, I'm not expert in this, but I know that, well, at that time, like in UK and Americas, a lot of people are still what we call seated riding, right? So they sit on the horse riding. But then they gradually changed to the Martini glass posture. And they found out that what is significantly improved for about 5 to 7% of the timing of the race, right? So why this Martini glass posture work? Well, if you look from the sports science point of view, you can easily explain that. Because of this posture, you can easily reduce the vertical and the horizontal motion of the jockey with respect to the horse. So the jockey is less fighting with the horse. And with this posture improving also the aerodynamic, that's why you are improving the speed of the whole jockey and horse complex moving forward, right? So that means that if the jockey can hold this posture more stably, it is advantageous for the whole horse racings, right? So we try to implement this. Indeed, I work with Amy and the teams, right? Try to implement all this analysis on our apprentice, right? Previously, over the past 2 years. Well, we did some motion analysis to try to look at the jockeys' vertical and horizontal displacements, as well as looking at what are the muscles they are doing to try over the whole race to see what the muscles they are lacking that we have to target to train them and improve the performance and decrease the risk of falls, right? So this is like this, right? We can essentially stick all these markers on the body and then ask the jockeys to riding on this simulating horse, right? Trained horse, and then we capture all the data. What we can capture is this. I'm not going to details, but this is like if you go ups and downs too much, that means that your body is not stable. This is not good, right? If you like a flat line, this is very good. This is number one. Number two, we look at the different muscles from the shoulder to the leg, all the different muscles, and see from start to the finishing line, what are the muscles at what time are you recruiting, okay? So those are the results. We test two jockeys. One is a very junior trainees, and then the other is like a good jockeys. So we try to differentiate a good jockey versus a fair jockey. And then this is the result. Again, I'm not going to details, but I can let you know that there's a big difference in terms of the motion that they generate, as well as the muscle that they recruited at a different time phase during the whole course of racing. Well, this Moreira is our champion jockey for like more than 2 years terms, right? So he's very good and, you know, won a lot of races over the years in Hong Kong, right? So I take him to do a test on this like racing. I'm going to show you a little bit of the results. Well, these videos will take like 1 minute, right? So please bear with me. So this is a video and testing that we look at the energy expenditures that this jockeys used during the race.
Yeah, I think horse racing is such an intense sport. I'm here looking forward to see how much it uses us.
So essentially, we'll put him on this simulating horse, and then we stick all this, these markers on his body, and also this EMG testing, the muscle testing sensors on the different kinds of muscle, and ask him to simulate a 1 mile race. And during all this, we capture all this data to analyze, first of all, the motion and the posture over this like 1.5 minutes trial, and secondly, what are the muscles that he is recruiting, right?
咁我哋就會知道各個身體關節嘅活動情況啦。
So this is how we have been doing, right? So because of time, I try to shorten it a little bit, right?
2, 1, go!
Well, we measure the energy expenditure. We want to prove that just simulating a race for like 1.5 or 1 mile race, right? The energy expenditure is like a very harsh, like soccer games or rugby games or even like boxing, right? So we measured his energy expenditures used over this, and after like 1.5 minutes, we capture all the data, right? So this for like a 1 mile race is like a game of boxing, the energy expenditure that he used, right? So this is number one. So this one, we are trying to look at his posture. As I mentioned, right? Well, this is all talking about winning and losing. If you have a better posture, better stability, better aerodynamics, then they will be advantageous for you in the performance, right? So you can see that this jockey is like almost horizontal, parallel to the ground level, right? So this will significantly improve the aerodynamic, and we also test the motion that he moves up and down and back and forth. Indeed, it's very, very stable, right? And then we also test the muscle strength, which this jockey, even he himself, don't know when and how he recruit the muscle. Indeed, we found out that, right, for different kinds of muscle, from the shoulder to the legs, right? From the starting gate, turning points, to the finishing line, he has been recruiting different kinds of muscle and different magnitudes, which he himself even didn't know. And then we are explaining to him.
You can see the good muscle stopped working, so you didn't use it during the final stage.
The final stage, he didn't use the muscle at the bottom. He used a lot of the hamstring and the quadriceps.
A lot from here.
This is
near the finishing line that he used a lot of the muscles over there at the hamstring and gluteus, right?
I didn't know that was happening. I mean, I never thought that on the full speed of the horse, pushing the horse hard, I wouldn't use it as much of that part of my body. But yeah, I'm very surprised. I was very surprised.
So those are the summaries of the findings. As I mentioned, we measure the energy expenditure, which is very much like a boxing games, and then we measure all his motions and the muscle that have been recruited, right? Now, we take this, our jockey as an elite athlete. I'm comparing him to the Hong Kong Footballers of the Year at that time to compare the basic physique in different aspects. So this is another 1 minute, right, videos, right? He is the team captain of the Hong Kong football team, and he's short, very much like Morera, right? So it's like an equivalent, you know, height and body composition. So this is like a competition between a jockey and professional football players, right?
Very good idea how well I am.
Test number 1 is to
第一項
test
測試
the
要兩位運動員
arm
各
muscles.
自進行
You
一
can
體上
you
升
can guess, right?
比
For
較
football
佢哋嘅
players,
上
probably
肢
this is
肌
not very good. So for jockey, they use a lot of these upper bodies, right? So
咁我哋嘅騎師代表又做到幾多下呢？
so these football players only can finish about 8, and Morera can easily finish over 10s, right? This is not a surprise to me, right? So the second one is like
測試結果話俾我哋聽，因為騎師測
test number 2
呢個靜態肌力測量器
is testing
就係用嚟進
the
行第二
core
個測
muscle
試嘅
strength.
儀器。
The core
佢可
muscle
以量
strength.
度
Well,
兩位
as I
運動員
mentioned, the
嘅腰
jockey
部
needs
肌
to
肉力
hold
量。
this
腰部
Martini
靜態
class
肌力測試
posture
咧，
for
佢
quite
個單
more
位
than
係
1
公斤，
minute,
即
right?
係
So
好似
we
你
suppose
舉
that
重
his
到
core
底可以
muscle
舉
is
到
very
幾多
good
公斤嘅？
when compared with this Hong Kong Footballers of the Year,
Yeah, I
right?
do pull the horses back and push them forward every day of my life, so I'm quite confident that I will be above of the average.
3, 2, 1, go！ 測試結果係莫雷拉可以做出126公斤嘅成績，而盧君怡可以做出113
So
公斤。
again,
莫
it's
雷拉
win
就首
with a
先一籌
narrow gap, right?
因
So
為佢喺拆
the
嘅
jockeys
時候
win
需
again,
要
right?
維持一個
So lastly,
彎
we
低
want to
腰嘅動作啦
test the lower limb muscle
最後一個
power.
測試
You may
睇下
think
兩
that,
位運
well,
動員
for
下肢
jockey,
嘅肌肉
for
力量
football player, their quadriceps, the lower limb muscle power must be very strong. Let's look at the results, right? So this is all those scientific way to test the different kinds of muscle power, and this is testing the lower limb muscle power, which include the quadriceps and the hamstrings. Right?
去到40幾度啦。咁我相信因為
Before the
我哋
test, he is
比較
very
做得
confident
多
that he
啦，
can
咁我
beat
相信
the
會好過
jockey.
騎師。
立定跳高，盧君怡得出嘅結果係43厘米。
We are measuring the distance that he raised
I'm
above
sure
the
I wouldn't
platform.
be
Right?
able to jump any higher than a soccer player.
Even he
But at the end
himself
of the
think that
day,
he
I'm
will
very,
not be
very
as good
looking
as the
forward to
football
see the
players,
result.
right?
究竟雷神嘅彈跳力有幾多呢？莫雷拉同盧君怡
It's the
一
same.
樣跳到43厘米。
It's the same. So you can see who win, right? So indeed, our jockeys win over there, right?
好多時候都
So this is now the summary of this
總結三項測試
competitions,
結果
right?
莫雷拉做到15下引體
You can
上
this
升
this what we call a test battery triangle, right? Where our jockeys cover a larger surface area, while our Hong Kong Footballers of the Year cover a smaller surface area. That means at these competitions, our jockey
至於
won,
下肢
right?
肌肉力量測試，雖然莫雷拉同盧君
So I don't want to linger on too long, right, for this, but I just want to let you know that, well, sports science is can be applied to improve the performance for our jockeys, right? This is also very useful as a monitoring and assessment as well, right? Finally, I want to bring you through a little bit about one very important issues regarding the weight control and how we look at it from a sports medicine aspect, right? So this is what we captured in the field of our jockeys in Hong Kong.
I love the occasional chocolate bar or, you know, something like that.
Barbecue. I love that, but we can't eat that much because that gets you very fat and it's hard to get rid of.
We asked them how they control the weight. How they control the weight. So they tell you that, well, they will control their diet and all this, right? And similarly, Morera is talking about how he controlled the weights, right?
More vegetables, a little bit of rice because I can't live without rice.
This is what they tell
eating
you.
quite a lot of
But
fish
is
as
this
well,
the
which is
reality?
quite,
Well, we'll discuss on that, right?
More vegetables.
So this is a paper published and a study published in Hong Kong, studying on jockeys regarding some of the parameters that we want to measure, including, first of all, their nutritional status, and secondly, the bone quality, and finally, their hydrational status. Well, this Study shows that, first of all, I just want to summarize that while our Hong Kong jockey, very much like for a few other studies all around the world for the jockeys, we have a little bit of osteopenia. Osteopenia means that our bone quality is not very good around the heel region. It's not yet reaching osteoporosis that you need treatment, but means that it's very different from the other kinds of sports. For football, rugby, and all this, they very seldomly they will have this osteopenia at the age of 20 or 30 something, right? So this is one issue. And secondly, that well, the energy and protein intake was significantly lower on the race day. You can imagine that, very likely, right? It's not a surprise for us. And also, they have inadequacy of a micronutrient. What's the micronutrient which is important? Essentially, we are talking about vitamin D and calcium. Now, they have less nutrition, they have vitamin D deficiency, and less calcium. That's why they have osteopenia. It means the bone quality is not good. So the problem was that it's not just because of the nutrient is not okay. Because if you have a malnutrition or relatively like the nutritional status is not that good, and also you are very often hypohydration. That means that they have to restrict their fluid intake very often, right? And this will lead to a lot of problems from these studies. These two studies showing about the psychological effect on the jockeys in weight reduction. And very often they found that they have a depressed mood because of that, right? So lots of jockeys, essentially they are not just on using diet control, but more on the sauna and food restrictions for weight reduction. This is the reality, right? So the consensus from this study is that our jockey has relatively suboptimal bone health, and also they have suboptimal nutrition from energy, protein, and micronutrients, and suboptimal hydration status. And the problem of all this is that they can have weight loss to fulfill the criteria of the race, but in return, they have a compromised nutrition, bone density, dehydration, and that will prone them for injury. If you fall, you will easier get fractures. And also, you have poor recovery between the races, like Wednesday and then Sunday. Between like these 3 days, you may have a less good recovery. And most importantly, some studies already show that it will affect the mood and causing some significant psychological depressions. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to summarize my talk over the past 30 minutes in the followings. First of all, I think there is still a lack of very good scientific research on the sports medicine and science applications for jockeys to protecting their health at the moment. And the application of all this knowledge for the best benefit of the health of the jockey still has lots of room to be improved. As I mentioned, all those are those initiations between my team and the Jockey Club's colleagues, right? But it's not like publishing data and all this, but we believe that there are lots of rooms to apply and improve. So I think that, first of all, we probably need some consistent documentation and analysis of this injury and health problems of the jockey, so much so that can provide a platform to facilitate further injury prevention program and ultimately make the best benefit for the sports safer of the jockey. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me. This is my research team, and for this preparation of this talk, they have helped me to prepare all this like video testing and all this. I have to thank them. And once again, thank you Hong Kong Jockey Club, Amy, and all the board members, as well as the Asian Racing Conference for inviting me to come over here. Thank you very much.
Great, Professor. Thank you very much indeed. If you want to have a seat, because you're going to be joining our panel after the next two presentations, which are about vocational training. And we're going to get the perspective from the Hong Kong Jockey Club and from the Chief Executive of the British Riding School. Amy, if you want to come up to the stage. Amy Chan is the manager of the Racing Development Board, and she's also headmistress of the Hong Kong Jockey Club's Apprentice Jockeys School. The title's not there yet, so I'll say it. It's the Hong Kong Jockey Club's vocational training program you're going to tell us about.
That's right. Yeah, thank you very much.
Can we also eventually get some seats on for Amy and Grant, please? Yep. Do you want to do that now? No, not now. Okay. Okay. Now. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Yong, actually. Thanks, my boss, because they're giving me a very good opportunity to be here. I was here in Seoul in 1988 Olympics. So it's 30 years from now. So it is a very, very good time for me to come over again. But now I'm presenting something on racing industry. Okay. So today, I will talk about some contents to cover this. Because of time, I think I will speed it up. For those who do not know much about Hong Kong Jockey Club, I'll give you a very brief overview. The club four principal areas of operation, including racing, betting and entertainment, membership and charities. We can see the club is the charitable donations, to the charity, to the Hong Kong, with 7.6 billion, about $1 billion US to charity trust. And the club is the largest single taxpayer in Hong Kong. We donated like US around 3 billion Hong Kong dollar, 3 billion US dollars, and around 23 billion Hong Kong dollars. I would like to bring you this because, for the past 10 years, you can see the turnover for the Hong Kong Jockey Club. Actually, despite of the global economic downturn, for the past years, the club has a steady growth in turnover since 2007-2008 racing season. Well, as my boss, Winfred, said this morning, actually the club has adopted the rigorous focus on customer satisfaction. That is why the steady growth is due to the strategy initiated at that time is about revitalized racing. And we built up the Hong Kong racing culture of excellence. So we have the initiatives such as the Happy Valley, Happy Wednesday campaign, helps to attract a new generation of racegoers to the sports, making the racecourse a popular place for young professionals, and settle to chill out after work and enjoy a unique social experience, blending thrilling sports and wide variety of entertainment. But we also, the club decided to revitalize racing and want racing in Hong Kong to become world-class, and decided to invest in producing local talents to become world-class jockeys. So in 2005, the club established the Racing Development Board, which sets the policy and provides training for all racing industry personnel. So the board endeavors to train talented athletes with good conduct to become successful jockeys. Well, in Chinese saying, we said, 十年樹木，百年樹人. What does it mean? It takes 10 years to grow a tree, but 100 years to nurture a person. It really takes, a good education program, it really takes a long time to develop. The Apprentice Jockey School was established in 1972, with the training model being based upon that which existed in many major overseas racing jurisdictions, particularly in the UK. We put apprentices, when they reach a certain level, we allocated to a selected trainer who would be required to mentor the apprentice and provide riding opportunities in track work, barrier trials, and ultimately in racing. So you can see trainer Tony Cruz and also Ricky Yu from the first Apprentice Jockey's School cohort. But today's training is a bit different. We need to use a good education system, and it takes really good long time to develop a person. You can see a lot of apprentices. When they first started, this cohort is started from 2009. Jackie Wong, Dylan Mo, and Kay Chong was at that time. So the change of French jockey system, we tried to have the training based in China to start the foundation racing trainees program training, and then we have the immediate training at R&D, another venue in China, and then before they come back to Sha-tin for the advanced training for the racing trainees. And then we send them to overseas for 3 months training as potential work riders, but for AJs maybe take 2 years. So since the development of the Racing Development Board, that means the club committed to developing new generation of local talent for the entire industry, be it nurturing a progression of highly skilled local jockeys who could compete equally with overseas jockeys, providing competent and dedicated track work riders, the training of other members of the racing workforce, such as the civil assistants. And so we put all the training under one roof, and we developed the Cert 2 in racing, Cert 3, Cert 4, and all the personnel working for the racing industry should attain or obtain certain kind of levels of qualifications. We also have ferry course, and also we have the Cadet Siberian Stewards course as well. I actually introduced the dual education system into AJS training. This is very successful in Germany. And that means integrating school-based learning with work-based practice. The idea is to impart not just knowledge about riding. A good education connects our trainees to the real world by supporting their personal growth and preparing them for different job roles within our Hong Kong Jockey Club. Since RDB adopted the dual education system, so we think that all-round education is very, very important. So the trainees will receive, including riding, stable management, physical training, financial management, sports science, sports medicine, English, nutrition science, and also music appreciation for the training. But the racing staff will have a lot of different types of training. And over 900 racing staff for the past 10 years have already received some kind of training. And we adopt our all program are accredited by the Hong Kong Council for Accreditation of Academic and Vocational Qualifications. And you can see we match with the academic, like in Hong Kong, qualification is also very, very important. So you can see all the racing staff, to have to provide all the qualification so that they can work in overseas and also, when they move to China. We also have a very unique career path, for the racing trainees. When they come over, actually they have different career paths, to follow. When a racing trainees, if they not become a jockey, they can be, racing management trainee or trainee stable assistants. So we have all sort of job types, for them to follow. The club also, appointed Mr. Felix Cusi, the legendary jockey, to join the apprentice jockey school as chief riding instructor in 2017, last year, was the first step in our development of the program. For potential apprentice jockeys and work riders, we introduced a training structure under which all new racing trainees undergo stringent assessment criteria. As Professor Yong said, this is very important because the physical training and also the knowledge that they're going to acquire is so important. So we have the fitness test, stable orientation, and in-depth face-to-face interviews. In Hong Kong, most of our youngsters will not have the touch of a horse, when they are very young. So we started at the age of 15 to come over, and we provided a very sophisticated racing training program to train them. But the training is not just focused on riding. We care about individual growth and development. The intense live-in program enables the school to offer comprehensive all-round education to all our racing trainees, including the certificate just now we see, up to qualification level 3. And also, we position all the racing trainees as elite athletes, and hence, strength and conditioning training to build muscle strength, sports dietitian to put a diet plan together to ensure they have the right nutrition and being able to maintain the weight limit. We don't want them to go to sauna every day, to put off their weight. And also, we discipline apprentices' sleeping habit and discipline the use of the mobile gadgets and mobile phones. So we respect them and care of them is the most important thing in dealing with young people nowadays. So we teach them to learn about the value of life as well. When they graduate, they become respectful young men and women, and we really feel very pleased. And overseas training is one of the key elements in our training. The purpose of sending apprentices for overseas training is to leverage on the well-established training systems and facilities overseas, and to develop apprentices to a higher standard prior to being licensed to rise in Hong Kong. This has proven to be a highly effective method of improving the overall standard of apprentice jockeys by allowing them to gain race riding experience at different tiers of racing, and without the extreme pressure and scrutiny which would exist if apprentices were to begin their riding career in Hong Kong. And I would like to thank Johan Papser here, because they were sent into South Australia at the moment. Of course, Tasmania and also South Africa, we've done. We send and also New Zealand. We send some of our apprentices and also our work riders to be trained over there as well. We have put up a great career paths so that they can put up good plans for the future. And these are our apprentices now become the freelance jockeys, and they're doing really good. And we are very proud to have these young men's dreams come true. And it's said in our motto, to strive is to shine. And before I came, actually, my apprentices and racing trainees composed a video that wants to show you guys about their life at the apprentice jockey school. And the song is also composed, and lyrics composed by them. It's talking about the dream. This is in Cantonese, but I hope you understand the feel. And they're searching for a dream, and most of the young people are doing this.
曾聽說理想永不低頭，縱望也笑着走。曾經過每段陌生街頭，也已經走過。如果說眼睛看出將來，我永不會迷失。如可再望見我的光芒，像熟悉的我，向夢想出發。
And this purple shirt is the mainland work riders flag.
為夢想牽掛，但願不驚訝。為夢想出發，漸漸不可怕。為夢想出發。
So hope you like it. Before I move on, so we are very committed to nurturing better young persons for the racing industry and for Hong Kong community at large. But what next? Beyond our boundaries, right? So this is Jongfire Training Center. Over the last 4 decades, Hong Kong's horses have been stabled and trained at Sha Tin Racecourse. To supplement these facilities for nearly 20 years, the Hong Kong Jockey Club sought additional land in Hong Kong, but eventually it settled on the site, where it had designed and built the equestrian venue for the Guangzhou 2010 Asian Games. You can see the RDB training stables. So we have 60 stalls and an observation gallery for visitors. It shows that the club is very committed in training and education of our staff in mainland China. The CDC will have 4 tracks, a turf uplift gallop, 1 turf track, 2 all-weather turf tracks, and which is the first of its kind in the Chinese mainland of Hong Kong. And the staffing, we relied on our dual-site model. And this is the obstacles and challenges for Hong Kong. The club has called on a number of its most experienced Hong Kong-based managers to make the move to Jongfire, as well as recruiting well-qualified field leaders from abroad, as CDC becomes another extension of the club's racing operations model. So we need to make sure that we have a good overlay of overseas experience in Hong Kong, experience managing the local workforce, so owners and trainers can feel comfortable that the CDC workforce is the right hands. So when the CDC opens in August 2018, a workforce of over 400 will be in place. Of those, 150 will work in stable operations, including almost 40 work riders, 9 traveling grooms, and more than 100 stable assistants. So the challenge will be to find the right people in China. So recruitment started over 2 years ago. It's been a long process. And for work riders, we started Chinese mainland intake for those work riders without experience. Out of over 1,500 applicants, we have a short list of around 500 based on a paper screening. From there, they underwent a fitness test, and then they went through a stable orientation assessment program. Eventually, they were narrowed down to 25, and they have progressed through training. They have been deployed to trainers in Hong Kong. And feedback from those trainers have been incredibly positive. The work rider training program is a multi-step process which ensure that when they begin to work with the Hong Kong horse population in Jongfire, they arrive with sufficient experience. Another challenge, the recruitment of stable assistants. The recruitment of stable assistants actually went smoothly with over around 1,538 applications for 100 vacancies. And we have started training for the first 3 batches now, each batch of 25, and approximately they're under training in 2 venues in China. So under the same process, we have interview, fitness test, stable orientation at different places in China. And they're under the training, the same program with the Hong Kong counterparts. So we also need to upgrade our trainer. So we have the trainers program. The inclusivity, we have the South African trainers, we have the mainland trainers, and we have the Hong Kong local trainers to train the apprentices. So the challenge is in the multi-generation workforce nowadays, there is a bigger challenge where the older generations feels the younger generations emphasis too much on work-life balance and ignores the essence of hardworking and a learning attitude. While new generation feels there are few opportunities and less appreciation of their performances. In the multicultural workplace nowadays, we need to explore best practices of working harmoniously together with better communications, and understanding and appreciation among each other in the workplace, dialogues to understand more and thoughts and desires of new generation, and examine ways to better recruit, retain, and develop our younger generation we will make. Lately, we have the 4,000 candidates, targeted candidates, which they are the school children at the age of 15, to know more about our program. So we just want to make sure the profession understand more of what the younger generation expects and thinks, whereas our new generation can learn more from the experienced seniors to cultivate a more harmonious and effective work environment, and sharing the fruits of development and help to sustain growth for the club. Last but not least, I would like to show you again the milestone that we have gone through for the past 12 years. And now we go beyond our boundaries and building organizational capabilities to accelerate performance and sustain competitive advantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. If you'd like to have a seat. Grant, your turn. Grant Harris is here to give us the British perspective, I believe, of what Amy's just been talking about. Britain's rider training program comes from the Chief Executive of the British Racing School. No, sorry.
Thank you, Adnan. Good evening. Yet another Brit, yet another pale, male, stale, white guy, I'm afraid. I'll get this over with as quick as possible. I know we're running late. However, just going back on some of the themes we've already spoken about today, many of the things that we do are similar to what Amy does in Hong Kong, but you should all be aware, obviously, of the changing demographics and the way people are changing. And indeed, recently at our racing school, we've had to deal with the first transition of gender during a race, during one of our courses, when a young lady transitioned into a young man at the time of training. So there are lots and lots of challenges out there, not just teaching people to ride, but it's all to do about life skills and supporting people through their journey, as Amy has alluded to. Susanna earlier mentioned that we have some challenges in the UK. But firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for staying on. It's a bit late in the afternoon now, and giving me this opportunity to present and discuss, hopefully, vocational training in the horse racing industry and give a brief insight into the way it's delivered in the UK. I feel slightly like the poor relation after Amy's presentation. There are two racing schools in the UK, both are independent charities. We have to bid for government and industry funding. One is in the north of England in Doncaster, it's called the Northern Racing College, and as Adnan said, I'm the CEO of the British Racing School. This is a new market in the UK, which is often referred to as the headquarters of racing. Firstly, there's one large statement to make, and I sat through this morning, and although I think us talking about products and brands is very important, without single doubt, people are an industry's biggest asset. In the UK, as in many other racing nations, there is a skills shortage. As Susanna said earlier, we have economic full employment. And last year, for the first time in many, many years, more racing grooms left the racing industry than joined it. I'm passionate about training young people to work in horse racing. But young people have choices, and horse racing needs to be an attractive option. Without them to exercise horses, there is no horse racing. It's not a job, it's a vocation. We talked about that earlier again. It's a highly skilled and sometimes dangerous job with long, unsocial working hours and practices. And there are three main themes which need to coexist in the workplace at the coalface, where people are exercising racehorses in the morning, and that is recruit, train, and retain. So these are some of the things I'm going to talk about, go through very quickly, otherwise we're all going to be here very late. Those are the areas I'm going to touch on. So comprehensive training. We at the British Racing School and at the Northern Racing College aim to deliver a comprehensive suite of training and educational programs to those wishing to enter the horse racing industry. For those wishing to ride, the programs start as school children, so we start earlier than Amy would, possibly in Hong Kong, and then there is CPD for those to continue right through the rest of their careers. Interesting, just to touch on gender again, and we've been through diversity earlier in the program. We're now looking at an intake around 70% female and 30% male, and the UK industry is going to need to face up to that fact quite quickly. The trend is only going one way. There's also a range of programs for those who wish to industry in non-riding positions, and we've recently introduced a ground-based yard staff course for those that want to work in stables but don't want to ride. And then we do all the other courses for secretaries, administrators, management, etc., etc. We also have to focus on training from people from abroad, and this year we'll welcome apprentice jockeys, grooms, trainers and managers from all parts of the world. This spring we've just had 2 of the best young South African apprentices at school. We currently have an Australian jockey who's trying to transition out of being a jockey because he's 6'4" and become a racehorse trainer. And we've just recently completed the Godolphin Massar program for 9 Emiratis. So facilities. We're very lucky, although, again, as I said, looking at what Amy has, we're slightly feeling like the poor relation. The British Racing School is built on a 130-acre site in Newmarket. It was built in 1984, and as I say, it's a charity which is funded by a combination of industry, government, and self-finance. We're lucky in that we have all the major training assets, such as indoor schools, menages, horse walkers, lunge rings, all-weather gallops, grass gallops, turnout paddocks, starting stalls, equisizers, gyms, etc. We have 94 stables, 80 horses on loan. They're all retired race horses given to us by their owners until then can't do the job any longer. We have 86 bed spaces, 7 riding instructors, a senior jockey coach, a fitness instructor, and something I'm particularly proud of, we've just appointed our first school nurse. Training in England is not mandatory. Both schools care passionately about training the highly skilled workforce that we need, and there are many entry-level programs catering for young people with that passion to work with thoroughbreds. For us, it can start with pony racing, and we deliver this training to children regardless of their standard of riding. Children who don't have access to their own ponies, the aim is to get them to compete on a weekly basis around the country in pony races. We have 4 racing ponies at the racing school, and we run a pony racing academy where children without access to their own ponies can come to the racing school on 12 weekends with the hope of participating in a pony race. Pony racing in the UK, it's taken some time to develop, but now we're getting going. The price of ponies, especially a fast racing pony, is going through the roof. So we're trying to bring in young people through a variety of methods. They can come from 8 up to the ages of 16 when pony racing starts. Sorry, you can pony race from the years of 9 up to 16 when it stops, sorry. It's a good grounding for children. It gives them lots of confidence. They meet friends, same interests. They have continuity with the other mates that they make going through the training days. And any issues, we can address any issues they have knowing that they're in a safe environment. We also run 3 pony racing camps throughout the year where the children come and stay with their own pony for a week or again use ours. And indeed we had 2 American lads come over last year for the advanced racing pony camp. That's for 15, 16-year-olds just about to finish on the pony racing circuit before they go on and start their professional riding careers. Lots of our professional jockeys have now come through this route, particularly people like Tom Marquand, Harry Cobden, George Wood, who are just about to make a name for themselves as senior jockeys. We also run a schools program. This is for those that are still in full-time education in their academic years 10 and 11, so 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds. And they attend the British Racing School 1 day a week in turn time to learn about all aspects of racing, how to ride, and how we can confidently then signpost them into employment. Some have already ridden, some have absolutely no experience whatsoever. We use evidence from both their theoretical and practical lessons and upload them onto an e-portfolio of our own software, which goes towards their qualifications. Again, like Amy, we have qualifications that we want the young people to get to once they complete in the workplace. Students are also given an insight into the industry, trips and work experience to trainers' yards and to the race course. This program, again, has to be sponsored, and we're lucky that we've just done a deal with an old livery company in London who is now working with us on this program. Again, very successful jockeys like Luke Morris and now Adam Brasheka, who's been doing great things in the States, went through this program. Both pony racing and the schools program really are us talent spotting future potential. We're trying to make it fun and safe as we prepare them and prepare them with the groundwork that is necessary for the transition into the workplace. Foundation courses. This really is the bread and butter of the racing school and indeed the NRC in Doncaster. This is training for young people, 16 to 18-year-olds just exiting at school, who want to work for racehorse trainers in either a riding or a non-riding capacity. Recruitment is national and currently includes, we may take EU students at the moment, but as again Susanna touched on, Brexit may change that because of the free movement of people. It's open to all, whether they've ridden or never even put a head collar on before. We run 4, 9 and 14-week courses depending on previous experience. The 4-weekers would have ridden most of their lives. The 14-weekers may never, ever, as I say, put a head collar on, never mucked out, never seen a horse. It's their first time away from home. It's a residential course. It's a rigorous interview and selection process, very like Amy's. Fitness and aptitude are everything. And the aim is to replicate the daily routine in a training yard, with students waking up at 5:30 to attend their practical riding and theory lessons. There are visits to race courses, to racing yards, and work experience in a yard. Students are also taught functional skills. For those not aware what that means English and maths qualifications that they failed to get at school. So a school will have them for 14 years, we have them for 14 weeks, and we have to try and get them an English and maths exam. Again, all the evidence is loaded onto our own software of e-portfolios and goes towards their qualification. Here, uniquely, in our sport compared to any other sport, we guarantee these guys a job with a racehorse trainer. Last year, we put 175 graduates into training with a racehorse trainer. And can we just now play the video, please? Just a bit of light relief.
I'm from Royton in Oldham, Manchester. I left school with average grades, very average. I weren't the most intelligent, I was more interested in my sport. From the youngest age I can remember, I wanted to be a footballer, I wanted to play for United. I started doing part-time work at a local pub. I was working my way up in the kitchen and I ended up actually being sous chef there when I was about 17. I was watching racing on the TV. I mean, I'd always liked watching racing. I was just pouring myself a drink on the bar and I was watching the racing. The owner actually said, "Oh, Gavin, you're the right size for a jockey, why don't you do that?" And I just shrugged my shoulders and said, well, if I knew how to get into it, I would. And they said, well, why don't you speak to Emma? She's got a horse. So she said, well, next step is going to the British Racing School down in Newmarket. She said, you go there, apply, and then you'll be put on a yard, and then you get put forward for your licence, get your licence, and you race. So obviously it was all so simple in my head that just become a jockey. Anyway, I went down to the racing school and 14 weeks I spent there and absolutely loved it. It was a really hot summer, I remember. I remember sitting on the horses and just thinking like, where's my seatbelt and all this? I don't know how they had so much patience with me because the first couple of days I could not trot. I had to hold the saddle and I just could not do it. But I wanted to learn. I slowly got there, slowly started to learn. And started getting better and better and just listening to what the teachers had to say. And I remember them saying that 2 of you will be chosen to be a head lad and head lass. Everyone had pretty much ridden at some point in their life. Apart from me, I was the only one that hadn't, but I was determined to try and stick at that and achieve that. And I was made head lad at the racing school. I finished at the racing school. There's a great opportunity at a yard at Sir Mark Prescott's. I remember going meeting Sir Mark for the first time. I was very, very nervous. I remember going in the office and I didn't dare move. It's perfect, really, because he'll give you that advice and he'll praise you whenever you do something right. He will praise you, but he'll keep you very grounded and won't let it get to your head. They put me on the right horses to learn that I was capable with, and they slowly introduce you to better horses and more tricky horses. It was actually on my birthday that Will said to me, okay, you're gonna be put in for your licence, which then was the next step. And then the next step was to get my first ride, which I was very lucky. 2 weeks after getting my licence, I got my first ride, which was a massive shock. The amount of opportunities in racing is massive. I thought just coming into it, I only saw jockeys, like that's all I saw. I saw absolutely nothing else before I came into it, and now it's opened my eyes to a whole different world. There's definitely something for everyone because, like I say, even if you're not the most sportiest, even if you don't like riding them, you can look after them. You've got to be 100% committed. There's no point in going at it half-hearted. I definitely recommend anyone just giving it a go. You've got to give it a go once in your life. You've got to work hard and you'll get the rewards.
As I was saying, so our core business is really making stable staff, stable grooms. Occasionally one is good enough and has the talent to make it. So those 3 programs we've talked about, the pony racing, the schools program and the foundation courses really are our entry-level programs. Whereas I said, we teach far more than just learning how to ride a thoroughbred. It's all the skills to equip young people to transition into independent living with a range of qualifications and life skills. But some of them do go on to take out their license, and that's what I want to talk about in a minute. And we're very lucky with Gavin there, who was an exceptional young man. As he said, he was a sous chef in a pub 18 months ago. He's now working with Sir Mark Prescott. He got his license. He's had 2 rides and he's actually ridden his first winner, which is fantastic. Most of these guys, though, are going to need a second career. It's only a very small percentage which will make it as a jockey. And so we have to manage expectations and manage what they think they're going to do when they leave racing. That's another story. So license courses. As I said, Gavin's been really lucky and actually made it and had a winner. So apprentice or conditional licenses, because we do national hunt racing in the UK, and that's a different skill, allows riders between the ages of 16 and 26 years old to take out a license to ride against professionals, as I'm sure you know. We have a pre-license assessment course, which is held 6 weeks prior to the 2-week license course. It's a 1-day course where candidates are interviewed by our senior jockey coach, assessed on their fitness, their riding ability. It's then up to us to recommend whether or not that candidate is suitable to have a place on the 2-week license course. The British Horse Racing Authority makes that ultimate decision on that recommendation. We're then responsible for delivering a whole set of criteria and a curriculum on that 2 weeks, much again as Amy has outlined. 9 main headings: technical, tactical, physical, nutrition, mental, psychological, lifestyle, career, finance, communication and media, and health and safety and safeguarding. Course is split between the senior jockey coach delivering sessions and outside speakers coming in to present to jockeys. After that 2 weeks, they're then assessed, undergo a final riding assessment, simulator assessment, fitness assessment, complete a course and a test about the curriculum, and then they get their report. Then hopefully they get their license. Again, that's down to the British Horse Racing Authority. Once they do get their license, they're automatically enrolled onto the jockey coaching program. The British Horse Racing Authority introduced this about 6 or 7 years ago. It's administered by the British Racing School on behalf of the BHA. And the scheme is designed to improve the skills of young jockeys and to develop all-round sportsmen and women. Currently, there are about 170 licensed apprentices and conditionals in the UK. 95% of these are enrolled on the program. Once granted a license, the jockey is allowed 6 hours coaching per month from one of the jockey coaches in the first 3 months, and then this reduces down to 4 hours a month. All the jockey coaches have had previous successful professional riding careers themselves. The role includes one-to-one tuition, supervised course walks, post-race analysis. Jockeys are coached in all aspects of their careers, from technical support, motivation, confidence, fitness, communication skills, etc. They receive the coaching until they ride out their claim, and it allows them, we then have a 3-month cooling down period where they still have access to the jockey coach. At present, we have 23 jockey coaches on the program, and I think it was announced today that unfortunately the lead jockey coach in this program, Philip Robinson, who many of you in this part of the world will know, who's an exceptional jockey in Hong Kong, has just left to become a racing manager to one of the Arab owners. But there are still many other famous jockeys on the program, including Kevin Darley, John Reed, Michael Hills and Michael Tebbett. Running alongside that is the Racing Excellence Series. These are races which have special conditions such as hands and hills, training race conditions, whether or not the jockeys can use a whip or not. Coaches attend these races, provide extra tuition in walking courses beforehand, tactics, fitness, etc. Points are awarded to the jockeys for winning as well as being placed, as well as on professionalism and conduct, how they turn up to the race courses and how they interview if they have to go in front of the stewards, etc. Jockeys with the most points win the series, etc. And the series is recognised by racehorse trainers and owners as an important element of a young jockey's racing career. Regional training. As I said, we have our own full-time jockey coach, as well as 7 riding instructors. Recently, we purchased this mobile training van with an equisizer in it and lots of other training aids. And this facility is available to be booked by trainers and visits major training centres and individual training establishments outside Newmarket on a weekly basis. The aim here is to provide continual professional development for those working in racing yards without the necessity for them to have to come to us, to have to come to Newmarket. British Racing School is currently evaluating the possibility of opening satellite premises in Lambourne in Berkshire, which is the 2nd largest training centre in the UK. This will possibly include a schools programme and the CPD element. It would also help us in our recruitment reach. As I said, another very vital source of income for us is foreign training. We have a wealth of experience in delivering this for foreign students and turf authorities. We're involved in a number of scholarship programs. As I said, we've got lots of young people coming to us, and in fact we're sending Jamie Gormley to Australia at the end of this year for 3 months to increase his profile out there and to hopefully to train him to be a better apprentice jockey when he comes back. We host overseas apprentice courses where lots of jurisdictions send us their apprentices, and they come and all join together. And we deliver training for grooms, jockeys, trainers and managers. And also bespoke programs. In fact, we do a lot of work here with the KRA, who have sent us grooms, jockeys, trainers and managers for about the last 5 years. We also do a lot of work with Godolphin. As I said, we've done the new Massar program, and we've also do the Flying Start program, and with the South African Jockey Academy. It's not just about those that want to ride or work in stables. We also deliver for the industry all these other courses. These are incredibly important, obviously. Everybody deserves training. We are the main training provider for the industry in the UK. We have developed a whole raft of management programs which Jockey Club and the BHA are now sending their managers on. It's delivered through an independent training provider. But as you can see, there are lots of other courses that we run. And just to finish, the next big step in the BRS's history and the effort to be a centre of excellence is a collaborative project with the Injured Jockeys Fund. In 2009, the IJF opened its first fitness and rehab centre, Oaksey House in Lambourne, and in 2015 it opened its second Jack Berry House in Moulton for the northern-based jockeys. A third, Peter O'Sullivan House, will open at the British Racing School in late 2019, early 2020. It will be a state-of-the-art fitness and rehab centre, fit for horse racing's participants and the equal of any in any other sport, or indeed anywhere else in the world. To conclude, thank you. It's been my privilege to speak to you today. I trust you found it informative. As was said, ARC is a marketplace for ideas to allow nations to formulate their strategies. Hopefully, meetings like this will allow us to innovate, collaborate and transform training and education of young people wanting to work in horse racing around the globe. As I said at the start, we are only as good as our people. Thank you very much.
Grant, thank you very much. Okay, we've got 10 minutes, so let's be as targeted as possible. And actually, I might even ask you questions about things you haven't particularly addressed, because we can expand the discussion a bit.
Yeah.
Professor, I tell you what, you did actually mention this a little bit, but let's get a bit more detail, because you said that there hasn't been enough done in terms of both the injuries that jockeys suffer, but also this issue of the psychological effect of having to go through rapid weight loss. What is sports science doing in terms of trying to help jockeys deal with that issue?
Well, I would say that currently, let me take the examples of the application of all this in the other kinds of sports, because horse racing is a sports, right? So for this, like for example, for a lot of weight conscious sports like karate and all this, taekwondo, judo, rowing, all this, right? I would say that like in Hong Kong, we have been taking care of them in the Hong Kong Sports Institute, right? We are in a certain extent that, well, they are all being coached and also monitors regarding the weight control. And then we claim that this is kind of like a scientific way with evidence base, which on the one hand, we help them to reach the target, but on the other hand, we make sure that it will not endanger their health, right? Right now, I would say that, like, for example, in apprentice schools, under the school and all this guidance, right, they're doing quite well. But some experienced jockeys, right, well-established jockeys, they may have their own way that they learn from their own experience or their mentors to try to control the weight and all this, right? That may work in terms of weight control. But on the other hand, they may not be aware that, well, that may endanger their health. For example, dehydration is very common. So some of our jockeys, they get like the kidney stones and all this from this, right? They may get a heat stroke or collapse after the race or during the race and all this. So that may be related with all this like a relatively non-scientific way of weight control and reduction. And we on the one hand, we want them to perform well, but on the other hand, we want them to keep their welfare, especially on the healthy side, right?
Okay, you know, Grant and Amy, this very much is a question for you. I, yesterday, at the opening dinner, met two Sri Lankan gentlemen who had 100 horses. They were in one particular part of Sri Lanka, a very small organization wanting to expand racing in their country. They said at the moment they only get their horses from India. They're not here, they've gone home now. Okay. But if you were to talk to them, because in the UK, you've got money. At the Hong Kong Jockey Club, you've got money. The pictures that you showed us of your training facilities must be some of the very best in the world. But if you haven't got that kind of money, what are the 2 or 3 things that an organization could do to have vocational training, but without the facilities that you have? What are the 2 or 3 most important things in terms of your vocational training that you would pass on to other organizations? Amy?
I think to set a good model, you know, for training is very, very important. We start off with only 12 horses, actually, the retired horses, and we started with all the trainees without really horse experience. So we just want them to, you know, have the experience for the foundation training first. So they started with learn to ride, and then gradually move on, give them a kind of, you know, a little success in the world. And then, you know, we make full use of the overseas, you know, training, you know. And actually, the budget for that is not that big, because, you know, it's a win-win situation. We send to Australia, and Australia needs, you know, manpower as well. So we talk about that, and then, you know, we work out, you know, the system for that.
Grant?
Like Amy, our schools program and our pony racing programs are small beer, 12 people on each year. I think they're successful because we have a very good instructor, a lady who's passionate about it. She makes it fun. It's a day away from school, which they love generally. The pony racing guys come in at the weekends, but they're a bit more fanatic. But it's about infusing young people. Keep them safe, make it fun.
Yes, and I think you mentioned, Grant, that not everybody can be an elite jockey. So even if you like horses and have that ultimate aim, a bit like the chap in the video who wanted to be a footballer, a tiny percent make it. But it's important that what both of you do is provide training for every kind of relationship that you can have with a horse.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the horsemanship and also the sportsmanship. I think the most important thing is that every youngsters have a dream. That type of dreams, is different tiers, different layers. When they have a little success, they will move on. And then academic only is not very, very good. I think globally. Now, vocational education, I think, is the key to help the youngsters to find out something, that they really like. Not just staying at home, and doing something that they don't like. Horses or animals, most of the younger generation loves it. When they don't speak, but they talk to the horse. I think that this is a really good, way of bringing up our youngsters in the future.
And Grant, you were saying you at the BRS work with younger ages than the Hong Kong Jockey Club does. But interestingly, you mentioned another societal issue is urbanization. People moving to cities and therefore not spending time when they're younger working with horses. So how does that reflect when people come to you? What evidence do you see of what you need to do to them to help them understand the horse better than they might have done if they'd lived in the countryside and known horses?
I think you're right. I haven't got the statistics to hand, but more and more people are living in cities in the UK. Fewer people, young people, are having exposure to horses when they come. Converse, most of the girls that we would see will have ridden something. The boys split into two distinct camps. They're either born to it, or they've never put a bridle on in their lives, and they're sports fans, like Gavin. Sometimes it's easier with a blank piece of paper. He had no faults, but being through he had been through Manchester City's football academy. He was a sponge. He just wanted to learn. I mean, they're hen's teeth. They're great. I mean, we've got all kinds of other societal issues with weight, obesity. There's a huge stack of problems coming down the track, I believe, for horse racing in Europe. It's not just us. France has a problem with stable staff as well, as does Ireland. Young people are just not engaged with this sport. And I firmly believe that unless we can attract young people with talent, we are going to be in a serious problem quite soon.
Amy, going back to that panel that we had about diversity in racing, how do you feel in Hong Kong or in other countries you've visited? Because being in the job you are, you must be invited to see other training schools around the world, about women being engaged at the upper levels in terms of being jockeys. How do trainers feel about bringing women to work for them? What's your feeling about women in the sport?
In horse racing, actually is like a very fair system. Men and women, race together. So we brought up a apprentice jockey called Kay Chong, who she won the People's Choice Award. So it's the worldwide, voting. Why? And the trainers and also the owners really love her. But Hong Kong situation is very scary because after 15 years we can produce another one girl. That means it's scarce. And the people will think that, wow, that girl, is really good. They give her opportunities. But all over the world, I can see more and more girls and women, take part in the dangerous sports. But we should treat them the same because, every little things, we encounter actually the courage and also the confidence. So how we brought them up is with the self-esteem and confidence, and also inclusivity, and they think it's fair. When they reach a certain level, they will move up to another level. So we bring this up to all our apprentices, and they really hunger for that. So this is really good.
That is good to hear. Okay, well, 1 minute, 20 seconds, we could leave it there, couldn't we? We've gone past 5 o'clock. And if you attended every session of the day, you get a badge. Thank you very much indeed. Patrick, young professor, Amy and Grant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adnan.
Thanks very much, Grant.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Thank
Patrick.
you.
Well done, Amy.
Yeah.
So bright and early, can you turn this on again? Bright and early tomorrow, 9 o'clock we'll be starting. See you then. Thanks.
That looks